This is the story of how I lost 80 pounds using self-tracking. And by the end, you'll know how to do the same thing if you ever need to. It's no big deal, except for one little problem. How do you win a fight you were born to lose? A fight that evolution selected you to lose. When it comes to fighting bad food choices, we're literally fighting against the instincts that keep us alive. Food is a friend to our emotions. It's energy to our bodies. It's a drug to our brains. The gravity of that feedback loop is so strong, it's virtually inescapable. That's how I went from being an athlete to being obese in a few short years. By October 2011, I was 220 pounds with a BMI of 36. And it would have stayed like that, but one day I got fired up and decided to fight back. The difference was this time, data was part of the plan. I started doing push-ups that morning and tracking them in Evernote. I would also record ideas about how I could improve my diet. If you think of self-tracking experiments as a software release cycle, this was the alpha. I dropped from 220 to 200 pounds as a result. This validated the idea that self-tracking could work. I set a new goal for myself to hit 180 pounds, and it was time to level up. The next step was to really get into tracking and quantifying food. The Weight Watchers Points Plus program guided my transition. Weight Watchers points represent quantity as well as quality. This made it easy to see the impact of my choices. As a result, I was able to start breaking away from the gravity of the feedback loops I was born with. But even with this, there was a nagging problem that threatened to undermine everything I was doing. If you can't remember to track and reflect in real time, you just end up with a lot of regret and no progress. So I set alarms on my phone, I stuck Post-its to my desk, and I would even vary the location of the kitchen scale where I weighed my food, like all over the room, to find out where it was most unavoidable. I had to literally hack my environment to make tracking inevitable. But once I got things set up, it became a routine. Track, eat, check, repeat. I was able to hit my goal of 180 pounds, and I had learned how to create the behaviors that make tracking food successful. But there was a serious problem with this system. In the real world, food is quantified by calories, not by points. So that extra bit of translation I had to do between Weight Watchers points and the calories on a nutrition label, it made quick decisions difficult without consulting the app. So I knew it was time to level up again. I made the switch to MyNet Diary and began tracking calories instead of points. It was jarring at first, but I soon realized I had made the right decision. My new goal is to hit 140 pounds, which, to understand how absurd that is, that's actually less than I weighed when I played varsity lacrosse in high school. Tracking calories allowed the data to become a part of my intuition. For example, I noticed that diced tomatoes had a ridiculously low amount of calories for the volume. I started including them in all my meals right away. At this point, I had the full system running, and it was paying off big time. In just a little over a year, I'd gone from 220 pounds to 145 pounds. I lost 75 pounds, and I knew nothing could stop me from reaching 140. Then the worst thing that could possibly happen happened. An epic relapse that threatened to break all the new habits and reinstall the bad ones. It's called Thanksgiving. And I'd seen this punch before. It always destroys the plan. But how could this happen after all that work to change? Well, the usual suspects ganged up, and they attacked all at once, and the system cracked. It turned out tracking was not, in and of itself, the savior that I thought it was. As the reality set in, I remembered all the previous attempts at managing weight that had failed in the same way. I wondered If this can't work, is there any hope left at all? I had no one to blame but myself, of course. This is what happens to those who are stupid enough to think they can change things. I was born to lose this fight, and the rules of biology guaranteed it. I expected to fall right back into the gravity of bad eating habits. But as the weeks went by, something amazing happened. Instead of gaining weight from the holidays, I lost it. The relapse that had always signaled a final defeat turned out to be a single defeat. And instead of taking months to get back on track, it only took one day. The usual suspects were still a threat, but this time something was different. This time the habits to reflect and track were already there. I didn't need to rebuild them, it was automatic. So the weight kept going down along with the BMI. The 140-pound barrier was shattered, and by July 2013 I reached 132 pounds with a BMI of 21. It turned out I had already won the food fight, but I didn't know it until my system was pushed to failure. The habits I built in the earlier months had quietly changed the rules in my favor. The only way to win a food fight, or any fight you were born to lose, is to change the rules, and that's what self-tracking gives you, the ability to change the rules just enough so that winning is possible. Thank you. Thank you.
Questions? So, in my opinion, when you make such a big lifestyle change, if it's going to stick, you don't have to make you don't have to change your habits. So, just going back, what are maybe one or two big habits that you started with that you changed first, one at a time, which kind of made things easier?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure you heard the question, but it's what were the keystone habits? I think you're pretty much sure. The chronology was pretty accurate. I've always used Evernote, so annotating my life was built in. But it's weird, when I started tracking the push-ups I was doing, it sort of catalyzed something that made me realize it's motivating me to do more, but if I just apply this to food, the benefits are going to be much greater. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, like I said, is just getting the alarms and prompts and hacking your environment to make tracking inevitable, because it's a very unnatural thing to track your food when you eat. But as soon as you do that, the results just snowball.
So, and what is your relationship to tracking now? What do you see now and moving forward?
Sure.
Are you going to continue, you think, or?
Yeah, so when I started this, I actually made a commitment that I was going to do it for 10 years, because that mindset prevented me from trying to do things that a lot of people try to do to lose weight, like fad diets. So if I wasn't going to do it for 10 years, I just wouldn't do it. My new thing is to try to quantify more nebulous things like emotion and well-being using Martin Seligman's scale or Dan Buettner's Blue Zones, things like that. That's what I think ultimately we're all trying to do.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this moment of failure during Thanksgiving.
Sure.
Because you said you were surprised that it only took one day.
Sure.
Did you record the date of the same day of Thanksgiving and then just sort of wonder what's going to happen now?
Yeah, so I think something that's very, very important, I'll answer your question, but I think something that's very important about tracking anything is that you maintain the commitment to track it regardless of what the results are. So I knew I was going to be way over, but I tracked it anyway. In the past, something like that would have usually undone the progress I had made. And that's basically because the habits hadn't set in enough to rebound automatically. It would usually take too much willpower to the next day not eat the leftovers. And then the day after that, you used to feel crappy because what you ate the day before. And so you're less and less and less motivated. So I think, like I said, the difference this time was that for whatever reason, the habits were so ingrained that when I woke up the next morning, it was just on autopilot. And I went to breakfast, I tracked everything I ate. I went to lunch, I tracked everything I ate. I weighed myself that week. And there was like no lapse. It was just right there. And what I had eaten the day before was completely irrelevant from what was going to happen going forward. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, along those lines, I just want to suggest that anyone who's not familiar with it, look up the stages of change model. There's implementing and Kafka basically suggests that relapse is part of change. And so instead of seeing Thanksgiving as a failure, it actually, their model suggests that Thanksgiving is part of the process.
Sure.
And it's a great way to think about having to change any habit, and that you have a relapse moment, you're like, okay, I had a relapse, check, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the role, if any, on, say, friends and relatives?
Sure, so that's a really interesting thing. Almost none, which is very rare in the case of weight. I should point out, when I mention Weight Watchers, that's not going to meetings, that's just using their app. So a weird thing for me is that it was a very intensely personal identity thing. Like I was kind of like, this body is not representative of my personality anymore. Like how have I let myself get to this state? And so I think in rare cases, there's so much built-in fire that if you can just channel it into the right habit, that will start to have benefits.